Welcome back to the Beyond Betrayal Community interview with Coach Katherine. Last week, Katherine and I discussed how betrayal fear can serve a useful purpose, the brain science of fear, and ways to avoid getting stuck in fear, particularly by cultivating joy. This week, Katherine and I continue our conversation, beginning with a look at Katherine's own story of facing tremendous fears in the wake of her husband's arrest for sex offending.
Katherine, do you want to share a little bit of your story of how your issues, your struggles with fears probably on an ongoing basis, and when you were, kind of stuck there for a bit, and how you came out the other side of that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me think here. Fear, lot of it. I think, in my case, my story probably is a little different because my husband, he went so deep in his addiction that there was huge ripple effects to it. And so, it wasn't sitting there and discovering that my husband had, been unfaithful, but it was him, going to prison and the ramifications of all of that. So we lost everything. So fear, I used to tell a lot of women that I didn't just have fear, I had paranoia fear. It was intense fear just because I was facing so many losses all at once. I couldn't just, yell out, stop, just hand me one fear at a time. It was flooding. And so lost my church family, my support, and we were pastors. So, lost my ministry, our home, friends, and also, and we women know all the losses we go through within ourselves, right? And so, yeah, I'd had a lot of fears and hypervigilance. And I think the first real one that I experienced was when the police came to the house. I don't share this story too much, or the details of this, but there was a bunch of policemen that came in, and it's interesting because part of fear, again, the amygdala and the hippocampus, it's incredible how much you remember of the details, of D-Day. It's ridiculous details. And, the brain is taking it all in. And I think that's part of why we get triggered. Sounds, smells, certain things will trigger us. It's because somewhere in your memory, in your hippocampus, I think it is, the memory is there, right? And so you get triggered. But anyways, when the police came, there's a whole bunch of them. They were confiscating all the computers, and I had a female police and the male police. And it's funny, I remember the officer who was questioning me. I remember his name. I can't even, on a normal day, remember all my kids' names. And I get all my kids' names all mixed up, right? I'll call my daughter, my sister's name, and yet I remember the officer's name. Those silly little details that are so impactful, right? Anyways, they were there for a couple of hours grilling me and then grilling my son. And I just remember as my son was there asking the questions of the officers, I was sitting on the stairs with a blanket around me, and something happened in my brain. And it was like a tear, something fragmented inside of me. I had a moment just to breathe, and I felt like just everything under me was opening up. And from that moment on, I realized that peripherally, and will sound strange, but I just think it's all part of trauma in my case, peripherally, I could see myself sitting at a corner with I call it a comfy cozy, but it's a blanket, sitting on the floor with my legs up like a little child, unable to move. And I could see myself there. And I remember that from that moment on, after the police left, I would refer to me as we this, we that. And I knew that was weird. I didn't understand what was going on, but I could see that there was two of me. There was me in the corner with my comfy cozy, unable to deal with life, unable to deal with people. And there was me, well, 12, 13 years ago, I would say that's the Christian part of me. Who knows? The survival part of me said, I need to deal with this, right? I need to deal with life. I have work. I have 4 children, adult children, but still. Well, 2 were adult, 2 teenagers, and I just need to live life. And us ladies, we understand that, right? And for years, I would ask people, can you please help me figure out why I'm seeing me in the corner and I'm saying we all the time? Something is not right. Nobody could understand. Nobody could understand. And we didn't have money. We lost everything to go to a counselor. And so finally, about, I think it was 4 years into my trauma of me saying we, I finally brought it up to a ministry that I was part of, and we did a type of Emmanuel process. And so we went into prayer, and I saw Jesus in my prayer, and he went to me that was in the corner on the floor with my comfy cozy, knees up to my chin, and he sat down next to me with his arms around me, and he was just comforting me. And I'm getting angry. I'm getting angry because he's comforting the weak part of me. I wanted him to say, good job, Katherine. You know, I know you're in pain, but good job. You're surviving. Keep going. But he wasn't doing that. And I realized that then Jesus said to me, he said, Katherine, you've got to accept that there's a broken part of you. And if you don't accept her, you won't be healed, because I've come to make you whole. And I remember telling Jesus, I don't want her, because if you bring us together, I'm going to feel everything I have felt. I don't want to feel it again. I've worked through my stuff. I don't want her. She's weak. And I remember Jesus says, then I cannot heal you. And so I had to learn, number one, I had to repent, because I had to say, you know what, that's part of me, and I've rejected the weak part of me. I've rejected the part of me that's overwhelmed. I've rejected the part of me that's traumatized, that is struggling. And so I had to literally just receive her. And it took about a week of me going through yet again all the pain and all that hurt that fragmented part had. And after about a week, I started to realize I was saying I, me, not we, not us. And that's our Lord. It didn't matter what other people didn't know about me or not. Jesus knew that in my trauma that night with a policeman on April 1st, what it did to me, it fragmented me. And 4 years later, Jesus said, you're ready now to receive that part of you that you may not want, the weak part of you, but that's a part of you. You need to receive that part of you that's struggling right now. And I think we all go through that without us realizing that there are parts of us that we're not happy about. The part of us that's not handling the situation well. The part of us that's always exhausted. The part of us that feels so unworthy, or, you know, that's struggling with our self-worth. We're rejecting. And I hear self-rejection so much in women. And I'm trying from that experience to help them to understand that we grieve the heart of Jesus when we self-reject because of the trauma, and to embrace those parts of us that may be struggling because of the trauma, because of the fear that we're experiencing in this journey. So that, to me, was a huge area of my life that had a huge effect on me. Right? Fear of being touched, right? The first couple of weeks, I would not have anybody touch me, no, or hug me, because I had this incredible fear that if somebody would just show me compassion, that I would end up losing it emotionally and end up in a mental hospital. Huge paranoia fear. I mean, incredible fear, because the strong one wouldn't have that. Strong, my mask of being strong, you had to be strong. There was no room for a mental hospital. So I wouldn't let anybody touch me, because I knew that if I let their compassion for me, if I could feel it, I would fall apart. Huge fear that I had to work through. So there's some key moments in my life where my fear was so definitely living from the back of my brain. And I had to work through all of those fears to get to the other side. So just a few examples of fear. So,
Catherine, you should write a book about that. That's unbelievable, and I think you did probably see with more clarity, as you said, what a lot of people are actually living through but are unable to identify. I just finished reading a book that you probably would have found really interesting, possibly, and helpful at that time, although it's a fairly new book, and it's Shattered Soul.
yes.
Five pathways to healing. Were you at the St. Louis conference this year?
Pardon?
Were you at the St. Louis conference last year, IACCESS conference?
No. I've seen the book. I have not actually read the book. Is it good?
It's excellent.
Yeah.
I met the couple at the St. Louis conference. The two of them are counselors who work in the sex. They work in sex addiction, but they also do a lot of work with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, particularly childhood clerical sexual abuse, and they also work with cleric offenders, which is a very interesting and odd ministry. And she herself is a survivor of childhood clerical sexual abuse. And great exercises, some visualization, meditation stuff, similar to manual prayer. Not quite as powerful, I would think, but still very helpful.
Yeah.
And some great helpful, very affirming, and it certainly would affirm what you're saying about your identity being split. And they call it your soul being shattered, so you're no longer a whole person.
Yeah. Well, I have a wonderful client, a beautiful woman, who has gone through a lot of childhood abuses, sexual, just everything. And we've actually done some Emmanuel prayers with some of her parts. And just to see Jesus come in and do a healing work and it is a very powerful resource to use on those that are going through a lot of trauma, and definitely worked with me in my fragmented spirit. Again, it's Jesus coming in and knowing what he needed to do to bring wholeness into my life, as he wants to do with each of the women listening to us, today. So,
Well, Catherine, I mean, part of your story, what I was hearing is there came a moment of decision. Once you realized what Jesus was saying was the answer.
Yeah.
You had to have a moment of incredible bravery. You said, I'll do this. I will go through this suffering, this pain. I will face my fears, and I'm going to to do this, knowing God is with me in this process.
Yeah.
And then that was the key part of the healing.
Yeah, very much so. I think, I think for all of us as women, we have to realize that we're not alone, right? We're not alone. And, every woman believes that they are. And so shattering that lie, you're not alone. And it doesn't matter, where you are in this world. I've talked to women all over the world, and stories are very similar. Their husband stories are similar. Their stories are similar. So we're not alone. You know, we are going through trauma. So the need to come together in support groups is so vital, right? Realizing that, you know, talking about fears, right? Recognizing that if you're in trauma, you have fear. We have a lot of fears. We have a lot of fears. You know, I ask women every so often, what are some of your biggest fears? Okay, and you'll probably recognize them, Lisa. I recognize them. You know, we're afraid for the other shoe to fall, right? We're afraid for our husbands to slip. We have such a fear of our husbands going back to their addiction. We're afraid, you know, for our children. That's another one, right? Is it going to be passed on to our children? We're afraid of divorce. We have such a fear of divorce, right? We're fear that our husbands will leave us, feeling abandoned, right? There's some huge key fears. And I'm just naming just a small amount. There's so much fear out there. And so recognizing what those fears are, I think is so key. It helped me. One of my fears, I was actually separating and divorce, because there's always that possibility. And I remember about a year before my separation, because it actually happened, I knew that my husband wasn't acting right. I just knew that something was wrong. I'd known it for a couple of years, and you know, it was just very toxic. And so, you know, that about, I would say, 4 or 5 months prior, I really spent a lot of time with God, just seeking His will for my life. And one of the things that I felt led to do was really face some of my big fears, and one of them was living alone. I married very young. I went from my parents' home to my husband's home, and so never really lived alone. Huge fear. Now I'm in my 50s, and I have to now think about finances and budgeting and, you know, all the things that I never had to do. And it was a huge fear of mine. So I actually sat there, wrote it out, talked about it with God, and I actually started asking myself questions like, okay, so what? So what if this marriage doesn't work? What's the worst that can happen to you? Are you going to die from it? You know, I would just keep asking myself these questions, trying to get this thing, you know, the paralyzing fear that comes with the idea of perhaps a marriage falling apart. And so when it actually happened, I remember the first weekend that I moved out. It was, you know, grief, another level of grieving. And then I remember the Monday morning waking up. So I moved out Saturday morning, and bless my husband, he helped me. I mean, bless him. But Monday morning, I mean, I cried. I cried so much, so many tears, I didn't think I had any left. By Monday morning, I remember waking up and feeling an incredible peace transcend on me. And I've had that peace with me ever since. This incredible, paralyzing fear at the idea that I may have to separate and divorce. I mean, paralyzing fear. I never do things in little, you know. Whenever I feel it's big, I'm passionate. And incredible, you know, peace that just descended on me. And I think part of it was me listing my fears, me looking at each of those fears and asking myself, why am I afraid of this? What is the worst thing that can happen if this happens to me? So what if I'm alone? So what if I'm lonely? What can I do about that? Right? So I just really processed all of these things that by the time it actually happened, my brain processed, my prefrontal cortex processed it all. So by the time it happened, the sting, the paralyzation of that fear wasn't there. And I was able to walk through it and find peace, right, with that decision. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I try to work with women is let's ask those questions. What if that happened? And then I turn it around and I then say, okay, but what if that doesn't? You know, what if you're alone? But what if you're not lonely? What if You find, it's a new chapter in your life. What if you find a really good church? What if, you develop really good friendships? You've got a blank, screen. The chapter that's coming, that's you're writing with God, is brand new, right? Anything can happen. So what are you excited to do in this next step of your life, right? Let's look at some of the good things that can happen. I talked to one client who's moved out, and she loves the garden. She's done nothing to the backyard. And I says, make it your paradise. Make it your paradise. What do you want to do in your garden so that when you go out there on your swing, you can spend time with God? So we start changing our paradigm, right? Sometimes we look at total fear, and that's the boulder in front of us. But what if we take our eyes off of that? Put it on God. He is in control of everything. He's in control of everything. So instead of looking at this, the fear, let's look at God. Okay, God, what is this new chapter in my life? Right? Last year, when I separated, the words new beginning came to me. Okay, so 2015 was new beginnings. This year is all about being content. Mm-hmm. I am content. I love my life. Am I sad sometimes? Yeah, of course. But I have much more peace, much more contentment. I really, truly love my life now. And it's all about getting our eyes, as we are processing our fears, looking at things slightly different, changing our paradigm, right, so that we can see beyond our fears.
Our fears are just such a prison. And I wrote just briefly, I think, in my first article about fear, and it's something I probably got out of this book to a degree, but it also, when I read it, my spirit went, yes, because I'm seeing this, and that's that when we're fear-driven, we're kind of stuck in this godless future. We're always projecting into the what if, and God's never in the what if. He's, all we can imagine is something catastrophic where God has no control or influence over our lives.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that, ladies, if you just leave your seriously addicted, doesn't want to help husband, you'll never suffer a moment's discomfort or whatever. I mean, Katherine can tell you that's not the case. I left my first marriage. Many people know my story. So I'm still with my second sex addict husband. I left my first sex addict husband. I had to work very hard. I was a single mom of 2 young kids. It's not that your life is going to from there on be a bed of roses. But I like Katherine, I can remember those early mornings waking up going, well, my husband may have acted out last night. I don't care. My children are safe. I'm safe.
Yeah.
This is so much better. This is just so much better than what I was living under before.
Yeah.
The new challenges were ones that I would much rather cope with and aren't as hard on heart and soul as those current ones when I was living with an addict who didn't want help.
Yeah, our identity is not being the extension of our husbands. I really so believe in marriage. I so believe in the sanctity of marriage. I think we get lost in our husbands, and we can't imagine our life without them. And so we become an extension of them. We lose our identity. It's not in our husbands. It really is in God. And so, one of the biggest things, the thing that was very difficult for me to do, is get my eyes off of my husband and start focusing on the one that can do the healing. And that was God. And that took work. That wasn't easy. But it was getting my focus off of my husband needs to heal me. My husband needs to make me feel safe. My husband needs to do all of these things. My husband couldn't even take care of himself. How can he? He didn't have the capacity. He had no capacity to even think about my feelings, right? He was broken, you know? I had to go to the one that could take care of me, could be the protector of my heart, could be the protector of my body, my spirit, my mind. And so working and changing my paradigm to focus on the one that could do the healing really, I think, was the beginning of me then focusing on joy and just my own personal healing journey, not my husband's healing journey, but my healing journey, even when I was with him, right? And that's where healthy detachment comes in. That's where you really focus on, God sees me for me, and he wants healing for me, just like he wants healing for his son, my husband. He wants healing for me. And that really helped. And then as I learned to trust in God, I found that that really helped with my fears. It really did. It really did. It took time. It did take time to get there.
Shift. And nobody's born in that place. I don't.
No.
Not that I'm aware of. It is a huge paradigm shift for all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw something out in there. I'm a believer in men supporting their wives' healing. I'm currently writing. I got asked to write a guide for couples to go with this book because I was told there are men who are reading your book and taking notes furiously and blah 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 because they want to support their wife's healing. So if that's where a man's at, I want to equip him. I want to help enable him to understand and do what he needs to do. But I also say, for a woman to be healed of this trauma, the marriage is not actually necessary. It's not a necessary part to her healing. She can become just as healed whether she stays or goes. And sometimes it's easier and faster if she goes. And I know that from my first journey versus this one. But there's the opportunity for growth is not necessarily as great in a woman, that particularly if she goes very quickly, rather than riding it out for the full extent that God would have her to do. Men, I think it's very difficult for them to heal. They can, there's healing for them. But I think part of their healing from the addiction is actually re-engaging their wife, is because it's an intimacy disorder.
Yes.
She is their first and foremost, intimate relationship outside of God. Now, if she leaves him, he can still find his healing in God. However, if she's invested in the relationship at all, he's the one who's actually pulling away, and he's actually undermining his own healing. Getting involved once he's got a little healing under his belt, and I think that healing comes predominantly with God, but also there's the physiological, the brain stuff that he can be working on healing. But if fairly promptly he begins to engage his wife, his healing is going to be greatly accelerated.
Oh, for sure. So and it goes both ways.
Yeah, that's right. It will accelerate her healing too. But she does. But we do need to learn. I think, and Shelley Martinkus brought this up. I'm not sure if I wrote it, but I certainly have thought it regularly. My husband was in God's place. He was on this pedestal. And I think many of us have that, and we would never cognitively realize it.
Yeah.
It's when something like this happens that we're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Getting God in God's place where he belongs in our lives is in itself an enormous healing moment. It's an enormous victory. It's incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
It brings health with it. It's it's an absolute
And that's really what I'm talking about, because that was the very first thing that the Lord showed me soon after D-Day, was that my husband was my God, small g. He was my God, right? And I was expecting him to take care of me. That included my healing. And he couldn't, right? He was in no place to be able to do it. And it really does take a man on his healing journey, right, to be able to get beyond his narcissistic, selfish thinking, and his capacity growing to be able then to participate in his wife's healing. Sadly, not all men go there, and which is horrific, and it's so sad, because I do believe that every man can go there. I really do. I believe that, the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross makes that possible for every man to get healing. But, that is a choice, right, that they have to receive. So, good point. Thank you.
Yeah. And even when, the marriage ends, I still pray for my ex-husband. My kids still pray for him. God's not done with it's
until
not
their last dying breath.
Exactly. God will I know God will pursue him for the rest of his life, even though he currently has no interest in the things of God.
I pray for my ex all the time. I really do. I care for him. I love him, right? We had 34 years together. But, he's in God's hands. He's in capable hands. And I am still my husband's greatest fan for recovery. Still am, because I know his recovery will have such a huge impact on our 4 children, right? And but it's in God's timing. It is in God's timing. And I love the fact that God loves us unconditionally, and he will just continue to pursue each and every one of us, not just our addicted husbands, but ourselves too, right? He will continue to pursue, continue to heal until, last breath that we have on this side of heaven. And that is God's grace and mercy on us.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the fact that you still love your husband, because I've heard in a couple instances women tell me, husband has a huge story of unfaithfulness and acting out and unrepentance, and I could never leave him. I love him. Well, sometimes you have to leave him because you love him.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's actually the reality is that you're afraid.
Yeah.
You're afraid of the unknown, like most of us.
Oh yeah, it's a big change. Yeah, it's totally fear related. For whatever reason, people say in a marriage that it does become toxic. The relationship can become very toxic. Many times it's not healthy, and that's the reason why I left, because it wasn't healthy for me. I was starting to not like who I was becoming. And I knew that for both of our sakes, the relationship had to end. And I remember telling the kids, and I don't think my children quite believed me, I kept saying, marriage is ending. The family unit is still the family unit. And I believed it then. I believe it now. So every holiday, every birthday, he comes. We have fun together. We still hug. We still talk. We still, the family unit is still the family unit. And I don't harbor unforgiveness or any of those feelings. And I think part of the reason is because, number one, I really purposefully grew my joy capacity, really worked hard on forgiving, worked hard on those negative emotions, really worked hard on my healing. I'm accountable to God. And so I'm able to really be on the other side of it and spend time with my ex. And even one-on-one, we'll go for coffee and we'll talk. And, we're both very much at peace with that. Certainly I am with him. I think he struggles a little bit more because he's living with, the concept that because of his addiction, the marriage died. But, reality is that, I still see him as my friend. And it's good for the kids to see us together. We have a long history together. I've known him the majority of my life, right? So, God's been good. God has really been good in my healing. That's why I say I feel I'm really content, because I like where I am right now. I really am, even in my relationship with my ex. I do have really good feelings towards him. In fact, we celebrated one of our son's birthday, and we went out for coffee, and I said, I'm still your biggest fan for your recovery. I'm still your biggest fan. Even though I'm your ex-wife, I'm still your biggest fan and will always be your biggest fan. So.
That's awesome.
Mm,
That's really beautiful, Catherine. You,
mm.
I have repeated that line that you told me in our last interview about how somebody had told you that yours wasn't a success story because your marriage ended. I use that constantly because it irritated the heck out of me. And I keep saying, that's a success story. You
Yeah.
are a success story. You have.
It's God's testimony in all of us, right? All we're doing, Lisa, isn't it, is we are really, I mean, my testimony is very small. I would have left my husband, 13 years ago. I think we all have a testimony where we can all say, this is what God did. Because alone, none of us could have done what we've done. You stayed with your husband, right? And that's pretty amazing. I didn't. But what God did in my life has been pretty amazing. Still, it still goes back to God, what God is doing in our lives. And that's the hope that I think what we're offering women in fear, women in trauma, is, don't give up. God has this amazing picture, this amazing life for you. Yes, it's painful, and yes, it's going to take time to heal. But show yourself grace, show yourself mercy, listen to those emotions, right? Work through those emotions, including fear, and start respecting yourself. Respect the time that you need to heal. Respect what it is that you're working through. Find women, safe women, to help you grow your joy capacity. Realize that Jesus is Emmanuel, that he is with you all the time, every second of every minute of every day. Whether you feel him or not is not important. He's there. And yeah, and realize that you don't need to be stuck. That God wants so much more for your life. He wants so much more for your life. So,
Absolutely. Thank you
mhm.
again, Catherine, for sharing your story, which is an incredible story. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And you guys, you've seen the website up there. You can get in touch with Catherine through a Circle of Joy. I can't really speak highly enough of this woman. So if these are any of your issues, any of the areas which you're stuck, get in there. And if she's not teaching a course directly related on that, she can probably point you to other people who are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you can at all manage to get into one of these groups, you're doing yourself. And I know sometimes we all struggle with finances as part of things
Yeah.
falling apart. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
there's no better money spent than the money that
Yeah.
helps you to escape some of these
Oh
negative
yeah.
things and get into that place of peace and get
Oh
the
yeah.
support you need. The value to this, there's no price tag you can put on the value
For sure.
to this. So
Your
am
health
I?
is priceless. Your health is priceless. And really it's all about trusting God to provide the finances. Literally, take that step off the ledge and just trust God, because that is God's heart for you. Right? That's what Isaiah 61 is all about. He wants to bind up the brokenhearted. Trust him to do the work, right? Trust him with your finances. Trust him with your trauma. Trust him with your fears. He wants so much to help. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. He's going to provide for whatever
Yeah.
you really need. He will
Yeah.
be there providing for you.
Yeah.
So again, Catherine, thank you so much. And yeah, keep.
Thank you.
I hope to interview her again in the future because she's just such a blessing, such a source of wisdom. And yeah, I hope everyone who listened felt validated by what we said and what she'd said. And if you don't, if something we said feels challenging or criticizing, please, give us that feedback.
Please.
Our heart is certainly to validate everyone, to say your fears are real. Your fears, in fact, your fears need to be listened to. There are some women that have to flee their marriages immediately. Everybody's circumstance is different. There are some people who are going to be called to stick in and work through some of their fears. There's going to be God has an incredible journey for you,
Yeah.
and it may not look like Catherine's, may not look like mine, and we've seen all ranges of journeys,
Yeah.
and we understand God is not, He's going to pursue all of us to our dying breath, trying to to woo us deeper into Him, to wholeness and to Christ-likeness, which is a
Amen.
beautiful thing.
Amen.
So, yeah, I just ask that you would all have pray for all of you out there, that you have an amazing day, and that God will help work this into your hearts, and that you'll find just a little bit more freedom today than maybe you had before you listened to this.
Oh, yes. Amen to that.
Yeah. Okay. God bless you, Catherine, and blessings to all of you. This is Lisa
Thank you.
Taylor of Beyond Betrayal Community. So it's beyondbetrayal.community. And I hope you'll tune in next time when I interview someone else about something else. That's about all I know. Okay. Blessings. Bye, everyone.